Welcome and thank you for coming out tonight to our Finance Panel 102. We welcome our meetup group. My name is Michael Hellman, co-founder of Crowdzu and the Crowdcentric network. I would like to introduce our panelists for tonight's event. Next to me we have Megan Sperry, an artist, activist, and documentarian who will discuss crowdfunding pertaining to her new feature documentary, The Domino Effect. Next to her, we have Atit Shah, president of Create Entertainment, who will discuss his crowdfunding experience and private placement on his first feature, The Projectionist. Then next to him, we have Sarah Balin, a director who crowdfunded for her short Taxi Cab Taranga, and she'll discuss how that process went to raise the money for her first short while she was in college, getting her master's. And I'd like to introduce our moderator for this evening, Deepali Rathod, who is a banker turned social entrepreneur, and now currently the host of Path to Passion TV. Thank you, and I hand it over to Deepali.
With runaway successes and all these other problems that they've now discovered and they've become more strict, like what's the average success rate of different projects on these sites? And how do they ensure transparency, like once they're done raising the funds, completing the project, submitting the rewards or not submitting?
Well, the way the system worked is it's always been kind of community governed, and it's basically you have on every site a forum, where you are pushed to communicate with your fan base, with your contributors, your backers, your supporters. Everyone has different terminology. And so that is what really has governed the system, is that you're communicating with everyone. People are sending you emails. And if someone smells something fishy, then the community discuss it. It starts getting out there. It gets back to the portal. The portal then starts looking into it. And then they basically drop the project. And as the way all crowdfunding sites work is if it doesn't complete, or if you don't meet your goal, then no one's credit cards are charged, and so basically there hasn't been what people would perceive as a lot of fraud in the system. It has been, I think, a lot of combination of naivete and ignorance going into it because it's so new. So I don't think most of the companies, including the Pebble Watch, do not want to fulfill. I think they're just incapable of fulfilling in time. And so, you felt pressure, so you started, because people were applying pressure, and all of a sudden you're not having 5 people contacting you, maybe having hundreds. And you know that you're going to then, if you don't respond to them, you're going to have to then deal with Kickstarter because they're going to come. It's a pressure, and that's kind of what it's worked on, because most of these people involved are not large companies where they say, well, yeah, we'll let the lawyers deal with that. These are all individuals who get nervous and they want to make it work, and they're excited. And guess what? They're going to come back there for their second and third project, and so they want to get a reputation, kind of the way eBay works. If you are one of those eBay sellers who kind of don't send the product, or you end up having only 70-80% rating, a lot of people just won't buy from you. And so it's working with that exact, we're going to be incorporating a rating system on our site just like eBay. And so that's where the comfort factor will come from. Equity-based crowdfunding is different. And that is where it's going to be also self-governing, self-regulating. But there's going to be a much more intense vetting process on the people who are trying to raise money, because there's more opportunity for fraud than reward-based.
Can you tell us more about what's the average amount of money that a project would raise on these different platforms, and what's the fee structure? How much would each company take out of it?
The fee structure is we're as low as 3%. It goes, the average industry is around 5%, and which is what Indiegogo is, unless you do the Flex Fund, which goes to 9%. So I would say the industry is 3% to 9%, but then there's transactional fees. You know, we work with two different pay-in, pay-out companies, where pay-in is around 2.5%, which is standard, you know, with Amazon. But we found a great payout company that could be as little as 50 cents, while other companies are also still 2.5% on payout, or God forbid, something like PayPal. You know, another thing is not every site is global. So, you know, where Kickstarter, for instance, your project has to be in the domestic U.S. or now the U.K. A bank account, right? And we're a global site simply because of our partnerships. And so you could have a bank anywhere in the world. You could be from anywhere in the world and still throw up a project.
What about tax implications after you've done?
Well, that's the thing. There's different taxes that you just heard from Megan. If you earn over $25,000, then you're going to pay taxes on that. In some states, and that's the problem, it's from state to state. In some states, you have to pay on anything you make over $600. And then there's sales tax. So when you are sending out your souvenirs, then technically you're supposed to collect sales tax on those T-shirts and DVDs, and because the state, you're selling those DVDs, yes, you may be getting $50 for the DVD, so you don't have to collect tax on the $50, but you have to collect tax on the prorated portion of that DVD. So you say, well, it's $10 and the other $40 was a donation. And so then technically there's sales tax. There's also something called use tax. So even if there's no sales tax, but it's a service, there, one way or another, when we hold panels where we actually have, which we did in the past when we have accountants, they will explain that each state is expecting tax back from somewhere, either sales or use. And then any money that you ultimately make when you're forming this company to do your project, or for your web startup, or whatever the business is, you have now brought in, and these are not investments, you know, these are contributions, so you really technically have to pay tax on it. Have people pay? Not really. But there are tax implications that you should meet with a lawyer and an accountant before, because you're also a lawyer, because there's also legal implications of, are you doing something, are you breaking somebody's copyright, trademark, are you infringing on someone's intellectual property because you think you have a great idea but it already exists out. You have to do some investigation. When I was saying earlier about us sending people back to investigate things, there was a case where someone proposed something and I said to them, I've seen this before. You know, and you Google and you find it, and I'm sending this person a link and said, well, look into this, and when you work this out, come back to us. It's all about cutting it off before a problem develops.
You said that you have companies which you suggest for fulfillment. Do you have any accountants or lawyers who you would recommend?
Well, everyone has an accountant, and I'm sure he would be happy for me to. No, there are accountants and accountants, and you want to make sure that your accountant is familiar with crowdfunding and has clients who have done some crowdfunding, and so that's helpful because he comes into it understanding, which is why we have him sit on panels, because he understands the sales and use tax implications. We, as I already said, we have lawyers, and one of the lawyers particularly knows everything about crowdfunding, especially equity-based, and so they are advisors too, as far as taking the correct steps and educating us so we can be up here and give you credible information.
Also, there's the Volunteer Lawyers for the Arts. It's a nonprofit organization in New York. It's member-based, but they do offer a lot of resources. They have, they'll help with like setting up your LLC. If you have a project or a production and you have any questions about copyright or whatever, they have a lot of different workshops throughout the year, but they are really helpful. So it's Volunteer Lawyers for the Arts, and it's a nonprofit organization.
So now we'll move on to our other panels over here. Starting with Adeep, we're going to talk about your independent film, The Projectionist, and we want the crowd to understand how you went about making it happen. How did you raise money for this project?
Well, the primary source of financing for us was private. Really went out to, well, it was sort of like crowdsourcing. You went out to your friends and family. But the way that I found it best to sort of handle that situation was really treat them like they were investors. I put together a very formal business plan. We worked with an attorney. We worked with other accountants and producers, and really tried to put together something that they had seen before. A lot of my friends and family have invested in, well, not art-related projects, either real estate or diamonds or other types of businesses. So they're used to seeing very proper private placement memorandums. And I was lucky in the sense that I had a friend who was a lawyer who helped me draft together a proper business plan with a proper PPM. So that's the way that I went about it. We really went out to our friends and family, made it very clear that film is a very risky investment, that this might not return the type of profits that they're used to seeing. But as a first-time filmmaker, if you can sort of really let the investors and your friends and family know that you're in it for the long term, that you're not just trying to make one movie and get out, that sort of really goes a long way to helping them sell the fact that you're trying to make the first film, because a lot of times you might not make much profit on your first film. But as you grow bigger and bigger and bigger, and you start creating catalogs and libraries of films, that's when distribution companies and places like even Netflix and larger distribution companies out there in the world, they become more and more interested in your content, not simply because you have one film to sell. You'll rarely find on Netflix or even larger platforms like VOD or theatrical that they're trying to take a single film at a time. A lot of times on Netflix, you'll see some terrible films out there. Films that have been rated 1.5 star, 2 stars, and you'll be like, how the hell did this movie end up on Netflix? Why are they promoting it? Well, it's because it came in a catalog. It came in a library of films where they had 3 to 5 to 10 to 50 films to sell, and they basically said, I, as a producer, have 10 films, so Netflix, if you want 2 of them, you have to take all 10. And so that's how that's how you have to sort of convince your investors that you're in it for the long term. You're trying to bring a library of films together, so your first film might not make money right away. You have to let your investors know that it might take 3 to 5 years for any money to start being recouped. But the goal is that you're trying to build a library of films so that eventually, down the long term, down the long road, you will eventually find a way to return their money. So that's sort of the way I went about it. And for the last film that we actually, I don't know if I told you, Michael, we raised 20 grand on Kickstarter for my last film. And my experience with Kickstarter was very similar to sort of the rest of the Kickstarter campaigns. But what we had special for our film is we had some notable people, in the sense of we had this one kid from Twilight who has like 70,000 followers on Twitter. We had this other kid from another popular trilogy film who has another couple 100,000 followers on Twitter. And what we thought was, well, it's going to be easier for us to raise money than the rest. Well, we put a 45-day mark, and at day 30 we had 2 grand, and our goal was 20. So we realized that no matter what you have, it's still very, very difficult. And then some of the tips and tricks that we really started using is, a lot of times you're communicating with your own social network, and sometimes you think that's enough. Communicating to your own set of friends, hoping that they spread it out to their friends, which does help you raise a decent amount of money, but 2 grand is really not enough. That's all right. So what we ended up finding is that to really start leveraging Kickstarter and the different social networks, it's important to start reaching really outside of your own friend circle and group. Because a lot of people here don't have thousands of friends on Facebook or thousands of followers on Twitter. But there's a lot of people on Twitter that do have hundreds of thousands of followers. They do have millions of followers. And as long as you're proactive about reaching out to them, you'll find that they might retweet what you tweet to them. So find somebody who's promoting other Kickstarter campaigns. Find somebody who is drawn to your topic. So if you're making a film on, say, abortion, find people that are pro-abortion and let them know about your film. Start engaging in conversation. It doesn't mean the first thing that you message to them is, hey, help me. Just let them know what your site's about, what your film's about, and soon you might find that they're telling their followers about it, and then their followers are telling their followers. So you really have to, it's really like starting a political grassroots movement. It's all about not just reaching to your friend circle, but trying to reach to people who are interested in the subject matter or the topic that you're trying to talk about. So once we did that, we ended up finishing off at $20,000, $800, and we hit our goal. Yeah.
So at the end of the day, what percentage of that 20,000 were people you knew? And
I would actually say less than 25% were people we knew. We actually ended up getting lucky with one person on Twitter who basically said, anyone that retweets my message about this Kickstarter campaign, I will donate $500 to, up to a max of $5,000. And that happened within 45 minutes. Because people don't mind that someone else is willing to fund your project. So just Twitter is a magnificent place to find information. Just type into the search box, like Kickstarter RT, retweet. Like just key terms that people are talking about, and you'll find tons and tons of people who are willing to help other people. They're not doing anything on their own. They're, X, Y, and Z, they're journalists, or they're authors, or they're this or that. But as long as you're humble and you're honest about what you're doing, you'll find that they are willing to help you. It's all about communication. Even with some of the people that invested in our film for the first time, it's just make sure you thank them 15 times if you have to. And make sure you don't just thank them right when they invest in your film. Thank them 5 days later, thank them 10 days later. Give them an update on what you're doing. If you put up a new video, let everybody know you put up a new video, not just new people that you're trying to get invested. Because you'll find that the people that originally invested in you when you first started off, they'll be very willing to help you as long as they feel like you're actually appreciating their input.
So would you say it's very important to know a lot of people? I mean, it seems like it's actually more important to reach out to people that know a lot of people. Would you say networking and building connections is very important?
Yeah, I mean, this is more like social media networking, right? It's not the face-to-face networking that we're used to. It's really you're putting yourself out there on LinkedIn, on Twitter, on Facebook, and just starting to interact with people. So it's sort of a new thing that no one really has perfected, you can't really perfect networking in general unless you're just a good speaker, but it's all about drafting the right communication, drafting the right messages, letting people know what your thing is about, and letting them know you're serious, because a lot of times people are just think that, okay, yeah, everybody who's anybody's trying to make a movie, but letting them know that you are committed to this project, letting them know that you have a team who's committed about the project, supporting your team, publicizing your team, and then keeping everybody informed about what's going on. That's sort of really important. And social media networking is you can never do enough of, because, well, there's 100 million people on Twitter. So personally reply to specific individual people and just keep yourself engaged. If you're the type of Twitter person who posts 10 messages a day, well, for the next week, it better be 10 messages a day. Don't drop off for a day, because then it doesn't seem like you're as enthusiastic about your project, and you can't spread enthusiasm unless you are. So that's really important.
We're going to stay with this thought and continue with Sarah, but we will come back to the private placement part.
Thank you for joining us, Sarah. We can carry on with this theme of crowdfunding. Can you talk to us about how you went about raising money for your projects and your films? And did you attempt more traditional means of raising funds, or were you aware of such a thing as crowdfunding and how it works and how to go about it?
I was not. Kickstarter.com, and that is how I raised the money for my film. I think my goal was $5,000, and I ended up raising over $7,000. I did 88 backers, and I did not know all of them. You had mentioned I didn't know all the backers, so there are people out there who kind of were attracted to it and found it through Facebook statuses of friends and other social networking. Since then, I've learned a lot. The other short films have been budgets anywhere from $5,000 to $20,000, all kind of 3-day shoots. So I've done funding through Indiegogo, Kickstarter, and a toga keg party for some young friends. Also had a friend who helped out with open bar and silent auction at 235th, so venues like that. So I've learned a lot about that since my first film, and I really had no idea about the funding until I really jumped into it. So.
Now, this question is for all the filmmakers here. Did you set up an LLC or any other legal entity for your projects that you developed, and how important is that, if you did?
I did develop an LLC for kind of ownership of my project. Kind of like the basic level, just so I knew that I had backing and, no one was going to take it from me. But I just suggest that.
Yeah, I mean, I've set up an LLC for every single project that I've done. Usually, the way it works is you have a limited liability corporation set up for your production company or the entity that's managing it, and then what you do is you create another LLC, which is a single-use vehicle, for each of the individual projects that you're doing, because essentially what you don't want to happen, especially if you're creating a production company where you plan on doing more than one project, you never want a single project to affect the liability on the head or the parent production company. So what you'll do is, so I'll have Create Entertainment, which is my production company, and then for the projectionist, my feature, I created the projectionist LLC. So you really block off the liability from ever coming back to you. And for anything you're doing where you're taking in money from other people, or even if you're putting up the money yourself, you really do want to create an LLC. And if you can't afford a lawyer, there's online sites which help you, for the basic filing fees and things like that, to create an LLC. But you never want to be personally liable for anything. So it's very important to create an LLC just to make sure that they can never come after your own assets or your personal, your home or your personal finances. So I would suggest that no matter what you're doing, even if it's a $1,000 short film, create an LLC. So that way, if your grip gets injured on your set, it can only be sued to the production company. It'll never be coming back to your personal assets.
Depending on your project, you do need to speak to a lawyer or accountant first, because in our case, we didn't necessarily form LLCs. We formed corporations and then took a tax modification, which is a sub-S corporation, where everything you earn filters down to the partners. So it's basically the closest thing to a partnership, but you're a corporation and you have the protection, the limited liability. Limited liability, the LLC is a basically new instrument, so it didn't even exist back in the 90s. But even now, even with the festival, we have multiple companies because, like he said, if somebody gets hurt and they sue the festival and the festival settles up and goes out of business, the company that owns all the intellectual property is still in business, and you just then can form another company. So there you go, I just gave you, which my lawyer would kill me, very, very inside info. So basically you're creating multiple companies to protect yourself, and every corporation in the world does it. So if a corporation goes under, it doesn't matter because the main parent company is still hopefully untouched.
Also, we set up an LLC for our film, The Domino Effect. It's the Domino Effect Movie LLC. And there's two reasons why we set this up. One is because one of the subjects in our film was a very large company, and we didn't want to have them come back at us if they felt like they were being defamed. And two, we received a cease and desist letter in the mail from the American Sugar Refinery because our logo looked too much like the Domino Sugar logo. So that gave us an idea very early that people were watching us. Even though our film wasn't done, there wasn't a lot of press about it. We weren't even making a dime at that point. I don't even think we had started our Kickstarter campaign. Those are, really big things to be worried about. And, when a lot of this stuff is coming out of your own pockets, you start to kind of become very cautious about what you're doing,
So speaking of personal investments, how much, or did any of you invest your own money into your projects when starting out prior to reaching out?
As a producer, you're always putting up your own money first, and that's why you're the first person in the game, you're the last person to see money out. A lot of it is sweat equity, it's your time, which is your money, and then a lot of time it is actually personal guarantees. So, you can invest anywhere from a couple $100 to, I know producers that have sank millions in their projects. So I don't know what the actual amount of what I've invested is, but it's been 2 years of my time, and I used to make 6 figures, so I guess it's a lot of money on my end as well. But yeah, I think we've all had to personally invest in projects. If you're not ready to put your own skin in the game, don't start it.
Asking others to.
Yeah, right.
For tax capturing that, I fronted all the money, and my Kickstarter campaign was to take me out of the hole. But I am, kind of on board with. You have to be ready to put your own money into it and make it, go as far as you can, but you have to be ready to back it yourself before you can rely on others kind of supporting you. So I was in the hole. I wasn't really in the hole to do, work as hard as I can, but it definitely was a reimbursement to break even.
I don't think that we would have been able to reach our goal on Kickstarter if we hadn't done all of the work that we had already done. I mean, our video included some footage that we had already shot. If we hadn't put the time and energy and money into going out and shooting 100 hours of footage before we even tried to, get money through Kickstarter, we would have had nothing, no sample to show, to our funders. And we did basically everything up to the point we did our Kickstarter campaign out of our own pockets. We had our, we either bought equipment ourselves or borrowed or, whatever, to get out there and start shooting and putting our projects together. So if we didn't take the time or spend the energy or the money to do that, we would have had nothing. We would have been sitting in front of a camera saying, believe in us, we don't really know what we're doing. We don't know where the story is going. We don't know what the product's going to look like. And if people don't see that you're passionate about it or that you're willing to put your own money up, they're not going to be motivated to do that either.
We have always dumped thousands, tens of thousands, even hundreds of thousands of dollars into projects. Real investors want to see you have skin in the game, and they want to know that you are going to be working very, very hard on making this project successful, because along with their $200,000 they just gave you, they know, yes, you may be sad to lose their money and to lose them as investors, but you'll be sadder to lose your 50 or 100,000 that you personally put in. So they always like seeing that. But if you don't have it, then the thing I think that's, well, when we segue back to private placement, there's some interesting differences between crowdfunding and private placement that some people don't think about. That makes crowdfunding particularly special. That was, when it was, since it's only a few years old, was not available years ago, and there's lots of downsides to private placement. Yes, it's nice when an investor comes up and says, how much is the film? And writes you that check for the entire cost of the film. It sounds great, but there's always stipulations that come with it, which we'll discuss.
Can you, for each of the panelists, can you talk about, did you try to, when you went about trying to raise money, did you try to raise the exact amount of money you needed, more or less, or what was your thought process, and how should other people think about it?
I would always suggest trying to raise more than your own, because, pre-production through shooting, and then when you do your wrap, there's always more film festivals to submit to, or, another sound mix that you want to perfect your film with. So it is always helpful to, go as high as you can and reach out to as many people as you can, for sure.
Yeah, I mean, it's always nice. Well, with sort of the film that we did with the projectionist, it was all private placement, so we asked for exactly what we needed because we wanted to be very transparent with our investors. And even with my family and friend investors, they are very sophisticated investors, so they really wanted to know you explained to me where $99,500 was going to go, what about that other 500? Like, they want to know exactly what's being spent on what. When it comes to crowdsourcing, you can be a little bit more ambiguous because you're not necessarily submitting a budget on Kickstarter. So the idea with Kickstarter is you always have to be careful because you do have to raise the full amount on Kickstarter. So you want to be realistic about sort of what your network expectations are going to be and sort of the reach of your subject matter. So if you're making some high concept graphic novel where 50,000 nerds are going to be in, well then go 10-20% higher than what you're raising. But if you're raising something where it's a very niche audience and there's probably a very small percentage of people in the world that are going to be drawn to your project, you probably want to be a lot more careful about what you're asking for and really try to make your amount exactly what you need, so that way you can at least try your hardest to attempt to hit it. So it's really project dependent, I think. You really want to know your market, which is whether it's Kickstarter or private placement or anything you're doing, you really do want to understand your market and who your audience is before you get out there and try to make it. So once you understand your audience and how large that audience is, and more importantly, how engaged that audience is on the internet. So you might have a large audience, but if they're 75 plus, you're not going to get them engaged online. So you really want to know how engaged is your audience online, how engaged are they in social networks and media, and then really determine how much you want to try to hit, especially if it's a site on crowdsourcing that makes you hit your full amount before you get your funding in place. So.
Yeah, I mean, we, like I said, we had done a lot of production before we started our Kickstarter campaign. So for us, honestly, the $10,000 that we were raising was to set up our LLC, to have money for submitting to film festivals, to have finishing funds so that we could pay for a sound mix and to pay for some, editing. But those were things that we needed so that we could finish it. So it was our finishing funds. Everything else up to that point was out of our own pockets, So $10,000 was something that we were comfortable with. We felt that it would cover all of that stuff. But in the same, hand, it's like they take 10%, and then your rewards cost a certain amount of money. So in the end of it all, like you say, $10,000, you're walking away with maybe $8,500. So you have to pad it, like you were saying. It's helpful.
Another good question is, what's the mix between, when you're raising the funds, the percentage of people that contribute to your money, what percentage are the people that you know, and what percentage are strangers? What's the mix?
I think it definitely depends on your network, your friend network, your family network. I always found that I guess I do have a big network through work and through friends that are coincidentally all in the film industry. When you talk to someone who is not in the film industry, film is extremely exciting. And when you start talking about your film, you can solicit their excitement, therefore, hopefully their contribution. So, again, when I have a project or have something I'm passionate about, it's very easy for me to speak about it. So I think I found myself for my specific film talking to anyone and everyone who would listen about what I was doing, and whether it was a friend or a friend of the family, just to go off of what he was saying. Facebook and Facebook statuses, I don't really use Twitter, but they go a really long way. And I had, one of my best friends in France put up my Kickstarter, and just because she knew someone in New York City who was making a film, all of a sudden there were all these kind of French young people excited for someone they didn't know who ended up giving to my Kickstarter. So I don't know the percentage, and again, the other films that I have done, it's been networking through, those were all me producing, networking through the director and the writer and the other crew members and who they know. So I guess it's all relative, because I didn't necessarily know those people, but they were connected.
Yeah, I'm not fully sure what the sort of breakdown or percentage was, but I think I might have mentioned earlier, it was less than a fourth of the people that we actually knew, because it's hard to track, because Kickstarter doesn't really, they really would have no way to let you know that anyway. But when we took a look at our 188 people that donated, I only recognized 10 names. And then, we had other people as part of the film. That's one really important thing about Kickstarter is, one, definitely have a video, because if you take a look at any successful Kickstarter campaigns, I think Kickstarter might require a video now. They didn't used to, but you have to have a video. And Kickstarter, just like any investors that you would go to if you were going to Wall Street, they want to know you put your work into things. So really, before you put your Kickstarter campaign up, really spend a good amount of time putting that team together that's going to be a part of it, because that team is going to go a long way. Because again, just the amount of people that you can have as part of that push to their social networks. Every one person knows 200 people. Those 200 people they might send it to 200 more. So really, you want to make sure you have that full team in place. Everyone's involved in the project. Everyone knows what's expected of them. Everyone knows that they have to push it to their social networks. and everyone should be really vested, because if it's just you and another guy, another gal doing it, I mean, you're only going to get so far. So really do your homework before you put your Kickstarter campaign up. Make sure you have a very strong video. If you look at those Kickstarter campaigns that have made 10 million or a million, you'll see those videos that really, it's people who have put in a lot of time. I mean, months and months of preparation, full-blown teams. And when people see that, they know that you're serious about making this. That no matter what, like whether or not they get the money from you, and this is something that like I think people on Kickstarter are really drawn to. They want to know that with or without me, you're doing it. So I'd rather be a part of it than not. So they don't want to seem like, you never want it to seem like without you, it'll be impossible. It's just we want you to be a part of it. If you can sort of communicate that message, that we're going regardless. You can see in the video that there's 6 other people working on it in desks, and there's this going on and that going on. So the more passion you can show from multiple people behind it, and those, if you just take a look at some successful Kickstarter campaigns, you always see that there are many individuals being a part of it. You rarely see where there's one guy doing things by himself and he's made a successful Kickstarter campaign.
And there's actually videos about making videos for Kickstarter. You can like Google how to make a successful Kickstarter. I think there's, you know, at least a dozen of them. I watched a couple myself, I'll be honest. We actually had the opposite reaction to our Kickstarter. I would say we knew 80%. Between the 3 of us, me and my 2 partners, I would say we knew 80% of our funders. So that's, you know, the opposite of the reaction you had. But it was still a hustle. It was still every single day, you know, Facebooking, tweeting, you know, posting on Tumblr, you know, asking, you know, people to repost, to retweet. So it's a lot of work, even though our network is, you know, still 3 people that have, you know, 600 at least Facebook friends each. That's 1,800. It is a trickle down, but it's still you showing up every day and you putting the word out there every day and being creative, because now, you know, there's how many projects on Kickstarter and everybody's doing the same thing, you know.
You mentioned how important it is to have a video. It's required now, Kickstarter. Can you talk about each of your projects? Did you create a video or a trailer? Or I mean, how much upfront effort was involved in trying to get funding for your projects?
For Taxi Cab Durango, it follows a day in the life of a Senegalese taxi cab driver in New York City. It's a narrative, 11-minute short. So I had a very good friend of mine who had a 5D and a tripod and kind of primitive sound equipment. And I wanted to be on camera, explain the synopsis, explain what I was doing, but also capture tidbits of New York City and what I wanted to incorporate. So I ended up not making a trailer. I explained the film. It was me on camera, but then we cut it so we had footage of actual cab drivers from Chelsea. So we walked up to 28th Street and 10th Avenue, and it's a kind of a hot spot for lunchtime. And there is a man making, you know, kebabs or whatever on the corner. And there's a line of cabs. We literally just went up to cab drivers and asked them to step out of their car if they didn't mind and just stand there and look into the camera. And you know, we got these, I don't want to call them blank expressions, but you know, real cab drivers. They were looking right at you, so therefore looking right at my Kickstarter audience as it was a voiceover of me explaining what the project was. And then we just did a little B-roll of the city, traffic and stuff. It was short, I think it was 1 minute, but it definitely did the trick.
For our Kickstarter campaign, we did a video, and we actually did a green screen behind us. It was myself and my 2 partners. We described our roles, what we were doing, what our responsibility was for the production. And then we also cut into it footage that we had already taken for the film and described, you know, why this film was important, why we needed to raise the funds, where the funds were going. Because I think people really ultimately want to know what you're doing with their money. And then, you know, at the end of it, we put all of our links, all of our social networking links, you know, for more information, visit our website. So I think our video was about 3.5 minutes long. And then we posted that video everywhere, not just on Kickstarter, but we posted it on Facebook, we posted it on Twitter, we posted it on our website. At that time it was a Tumblr, so we hashtagged it. So that really helped, you know, bring people in. But then after, you know, our campaign started, we would post more videos on Kickstarter to help kind of continue the engagement with our audience.
Megan said it best. Don't just throw on trailers you have lying around. Don't just throw on any kind of promos you have. You have to be in the video, talk to your audience, engage, connect with them. If you can connect with anyone who stops by your site and really convey to them in a relatively short video, we tell people to keep it to less than 5 minutes, connect with them where they understand what you're trying to do and why they should help you and not the hundreds of other projects on some of these sites, then you have a chance.
Yeah, I mean, it's even with the online platforms, you still have to have that human connection. So you definitely want someone from your team represented in the video, and like I mentioned before, the more and more people you can have, the more someone can make a connection with, maybe not you, some other individual as part of your project. As long as you can find that human connection with somebody and find somebody to trust, because in the end of the day, they're trusting you with the $50, which to some 16-year-old student might be a lot of money, and they're still giving it to you because they believe in whatever you're doing. What we did for our videos is we actually posted 3 or 4 videos on the site, because Kickstarter now allows you to post multiple videos. So we just allowed us to, because a lot of times I know people are worried about sort of pushing the same message to their Facebook people, right? So you're always like, well, I'd love to be on there every single day, but I don't want to be that annoying guy on Facebook who's just constantly posting every single day the same single message, and a lot of people have hesitations with that. So one way around that is just updating your content, so that way you have a reason to reach out again and again and again to the same people. So what we did was just the film is a dark comedy, so we just had little dark comedy sketches. The first video was obviously us explaining what we were doing with the money, and then the next 3 videos were just little comedy sketches that we drew up and shot. I mean, it didn't cost us any money. We just needed to bring the actors out there, have a friend with the camera, and then just shoot. I mean, it doesn't have to be super high production value, unless you're asking for a couple $100,000, then it should be high production value. But if you're asking for low amounts of money, you can just updated content, updated information. Just over communication is better than under communication when it comes to things like this. So never feel shy about over communicating, but when you're over communicating, try and have new messaging, new content, new updates, new things that you're working on available, and people can then sort of feed off your excitement. The more excited you are, you'll find that people get really drawn to sort of that enthusiasm.
Can you talk a little bit more about private placement? Can you give us a little more color on how you went about approaching these people and setting up the guarantees or whatever documentation is required?
Again, with any sort of investments, you need the person to like you. You need to go have a dinner, have a drink, or have a coffee, and initially don't be this sort of person who's just pitching the project. In the end of the day, you're really selling yourself before you're selling a project. So just have a good conversation. Let the first 5 to 10 minutes simply be about something that is totally unrelated to the project itself, and then let them, for the most part, open it up, because you'll see that after 5 minutes of BSing or just getting to know each other, they're going to be interested in your project. So let them sort of open it up to you, have them explain to you what the project is about, and then sort of get into the nitty-gritty. But you never want to be over-aggressive with these sort of investors, because they've seen enough people. But you want to make it clear that you are asking for money. You want to make it clear what you're asking for, what you're doing with it, and what your plans are. And for all of that, you want to really come very prepared. So it's a rare opportunity that an investor who's legitimate will take a meeting and actually sit down with you and go over things with you. So if you actually get that meeting and are there, you really want to make sure you have everything else prepared, because the first thing the investor is going to do as soon as if they like you, they're going to say, right after this meeting, send me some information. The last thing you want to do is not be ready for another week, because by that time they've forgotten about you or think you're unprepared or think you're unprofessional. So if you're going to take a meeting with an investor, right after that meeting is over, whatever the investors ask for, you want to make sure that you are thinking 10 steps ahead and that you are ready to shoot them that information that evening. And obviously things like, just same thing with interviews and things, you always want to make sure you follow up, always want to make sure you're sort of thanking them for the meeting and things like that. But if the investor is interested, they're going to ask you for the right documentation. You need to make sure that you've worked with your attorney to prepare the right sort of financial plan. You have your budget in order. You can explain every single number. You can explain why, what makes your project different. And the biggest thing with PPM and private placement is ROI. They want to know, even more important than how the money is being spent, how the money is being returned. So they want to know what your plan is, how long it's going to take, and what sort of channels your money is coming back from, especially when it's not your friends and family. And even for your friends and family, it's important to treat them like they are investors. So don't just go and say, I don't know the answer to that question. If they ask you something, you really want to be prepared. So even when you're taking meetings with your friends and family, treat them like a legitimate investor, and they'll reciprocate sort of that professionalism back to you. And so you never want to make it just seem like you're asking for money. You're really giving them an opportunity to invest. And if you keep it sort of with that mentality, you'll find that they're more drawn to your project and they'll sign that check a lot faster.
What's the standard deal for film investors? Can you talk more about percentages?
So every film is sort of different, naturally, but when you're making independent film and it's your first film, the way we structured our deal is for the X amount that we raised, we gave 50% equity stake. The way the return on investment worked for us was that out of every dollar that came in, 90 cents would go to the investor, 10 cents would go to the production company until the investor had recouped 125%. So if an investor put in $10,000, out of every dollar that came in, we would essentially pay them back until they hit $12,500. And then after they recouped 125%, it would then go to a 60-40 split, 60% coming to the production company, 40% going to the investors. There are multiple ways to structure those deals. If you're an established filmmaker who has a track record of producing films, you can go as high as, after the 90-10 split, you can go as high as 80-20, 80 to the production company, 20 to the investors. And if you're a first-time filmmaker and you really want to make it appealing to the investor, you can flip it and do something like 30% to the production company, 70% to the investors. It's really sort of based on your track record, but if you're first starting off, you really want to make it very appealing to the investors, and you want to make it clear that you're going to make money before I see any of it. And that 90-10 split is really for that. If you can get away with it, even that 10 cents coming in for every dollar is important because it helps keep your production company afloat. It helps you pay your accountant, pay your taxes, and do some of those things that you have to do. And an accountant is very important when you're doing private placement because, in our case, we had 26 investors. Well, we want to make sure that all 26 investors are getting paid their right amount. And so an accountant is super important when you're dealing with private placement because you never want to be in a sticky situation in the long run. Then you want to make sure that your investors return to you. And a lot of times, as long as you make it clear that you are going to do your best to make them their money back, but 95+% of films, independent films, don't see a dime for 5 years. You want to make that very clear to them. So don't give them these high hopes, high expectations, because 5 years down the line, if you haven't returned their money, at least you can go back and say, I told you that this was a probability. But if you told them that there's going to be so much money involved and you don't see any, your reputation in the end of the day is what counts. So you want to make sure you're very clear about everything.
In our deals, it was 100%. So basically was hired on to produce a film. And I was maybe 21 years old. And had scripts already. And so there's the first thing. Have your scripts ready to go. Because the first thing an investor will say is, let me see the prospectus. So yes, you need help to write it because they expect a professionally written prospectus. They do not want to see typos. They want to see a good budget, an accurate budget that shows where all the money is going to be spent, all the money. They don't want to see miscellaneous of tens of thousands of dollars. So I was hired to do this film and was introduced to the investors while producing this film because I didn't raise the money, the director did. Got friendly with these investors. And then, of course, when the film ended, the director, who was also a producer with me, was busy now going off to make that film, to edit it, to complete. So these investors were without a project. I happen to have had all these scripts sitting around and partners who wanted to direct a film. So I found myself falling into a producer's role at that time. And so I went to these investors and said, hey, hey, Joe and Mike, I have this script. It's another typical kind of film that you just invested in. Why don't we meet and talk about it? They were in between projects now. They said, sure. And basically we sold them on the next film and put together quickly a decent prospectus based on the one that they already saw. So that's another thing. Get samples from friends. Get samples off the web, which the web didn't exist back then. Get help wherever you can in order to create something professional. Gave that to them with a script. So ultimately, it's the script. I can't tell people enough. You have a lousy script, you're not going to get people to invest in it unless maybe you attach Tom Cruise to this lousy script. He's done enough of them. And so you may get the money. But otherwise, if for a first film, low budget, you're not going to probably have big names. Then you got to have a decent script. And so we sold them on it. But because I made sure to always have scripts and partners who are going to make with it, as soon as that film got done, was able to move on to the next film with the same investment group. And then the next film with the same investment group. And we were actually trying to make film. These weren't art films. We were trying to make money off the film. So we went straight to distribution, straight to small distributors who would sell foreign rights. And back then, home video rights, so on and so forth. We were trying to make the money back for the investors. And most of the films made money, broke even, made money. But it was pure luck. And I'm trying to make it clear that a lot of it was luck. Being out there, doing stuff in the business, meeting people, networking. That's how the luck happens. Not sitting at home working on your script and thinking, well, I got these great scripts, but you don't want to go out and meet anyone. So it's never going to happen unless a family member can write you a check, and then you don't need to worry about investment. So that was the path, and what we learned from it is festivals are great for getting the film seen, for introducing it to people, to try to find distribution. But depending on the film, if it's a genre film, action, horror, you really can just go straight out and find distributors even today, because they're niche projects and there's placement for them abroad and even locally. But times have changed, and it's much, much tougher than it was in the 80s or 90s. The other thing that I want to mention nowadays, as we've come to learn, we are now, my partner and I are involved in helping, and I use that term loosely, assisting in raising money for much, much, much bigger projects. And so my advice to first-time filmmakers is try as hard as it is, even if you have no contacts, to get a name actor associated with the project. Because today, there's so much content. It is so incredibly difficult to make money off a film that you need to at least allow yourself to have as many possibilities and as many options in your project to allow it to succeed. Yes, you could be one on a handful that has no one in it and it just takes off. They're so rare. It's not a basis of raising money against. But if you go to investors and say, I have XYZ attached to the film, you're going to just pique some more interest than if you don't. Packaging, as Atif mentioned, is important, that when you go to a distributor afterwards, that is how you're going to possibly get your film sold. Like any business, know your business. Know the film, know it inside and out, so if they ask you a question, after they read the script, you'll have an intelligent answer, but know the business. These people have invested before. They're going to come back to you and use terminology that you're going to have to then say to them, well, what exactly do you mean? You've just already lost their interest. Go online, read some books, understand the language. He said ROI. if you don't know what ROI is without explaining return on investment, go learn the terminology because they're going to use it. That's the problem with technology and investments. They all like using abbreviations for everything. And so learn the language and be able to answer all their questions. When they say, okay, you got this actor, do you guarantee to have it? Do you have a contract with it? Or is it just a promise? Is it a promise on the money? And that's where the catch-22 comes. The actor, if you have the money, if it's in the bank, if it's in escrow, they will talk to you and perhaps give you, but they're not going to give you a letter of intent by you just asking for it, because you're going to then use that to go raise the money. So that's the catch. You have to kind of get a letter of intent, and usually that's through a relationship better than going to an agent, because an agent just cares about what money they're going to get. Now, I promised earlier to mention the downsides of private placement. With crowdfunding, you get the money in and you keep in contact with your contributors, but they don't have anything to do with your project unless you choose to invite them in. Private placement may want to have everything to do with your project. So we had investors say, my niece has to be in the film. My niece has never acted before, but I think she'll be great for this. Now you say to yourself, do I want his $250,000 and have the film hurt by this non-actor, or do I move on to someone else? And guess what? Especially if it's like a horror film, you say, all right, it's going to be probably bad acting anyway, so what's another bad actor? Every film we made, we had actors pushed on us. And you know what? But that's why people, when they watch horror films, for instance, will say, this is kind of crummy, it's scary, or it's funny, I like it, but it's really crummy production. That's why. It's not always the filmmaker's fault. But you need the money or nothing gets made. So there's tremendous amount of compromise with taking investment that you don't have with crowdfunding. That's one of the things exciting about crowdfunding. It's hard work, but private placement is hard work too. But it's hard work that the payoff is you keep complete control of the project.
So besides some of the advantages of crowdfunding, what are the challenges of crowdfunding? I mean, besides the hard work and the hustle which is required on people.
Well, I just kind of wanted to piggyback on what he was saying, because the work I do is social media, it's social justice based, or it's documentary film work. And in that sector, you really need to align with a nonprofit organization or some type of organization that speaks to the same type of work that you do. So, especially besides the crowdfunding, you might be going after grants. You might be going after funding from foundations, and it's the same thing. If you align with an organization, they may say, hey, you know what, we don't really like the direction we're going with this. We want you to kind of speak to this instead. Or we're not going to help promote your film because, this is kind of a threat to our organization. So you have to be careful any which way, even if you are doing something that's, a documentary film as well.
Can you guys talk a little bit about the different reward levels that you set for your projects? How did you come up with them?
For Kickstarter specifically, I'm sure you're all familiar with Kickstarter. I guess I offered for large sums of money for associate producer credit, and then I promised the levels went from credits to receiving a DVD and a poster to special thanks in the credits. I can't even remember all of them. And other ones, like especially with social media sites, if you give a little bit of money, they'll mention you in their social media thank yous. But even the promise of giving someone a credit in the film was huge, and it drew a lot of people in. And then when they came to, screening, I know just for friends and family and Kickstarter supporters, I can't tell you how many people came up to me and thanked me for putting in their credits. And said, no, thank you, because this wouldn't have happened. So kind of a simple thing like that, but definitely a promise of, the gift of your film to them, any kind of memorabilia, and then their name out there if they so choose to have that reward.
Yeah, I think credits go a long way, especially for the bigger prizes. Everyone wants to say they produced a film, so if you can give someone that satisfaction and you don't mind giving up sort of those predatory roles, especially on short films and things like that, is very easy to do. When you're making a feature, you want to be careful. You don't want to have 15 associate producers on your feature film. We had these kids from Twilight on the film, so for the teeny bobbers, for $15 they would get a call from one of the Twilight guys, so we had like 75 people that bought that. Then one of our actors got a voucher in the mail because he won some prize, and it was 3 days at Disney World. So we included for $750 like a 3-day Disney World trip, which actually worked out to them saving money and still getting all the benefits of like the thing. So if you can find some interesting things that you have that are in your possession, it doesn't necessarily always have to be film related. I mean, ideally, most of them are related somehow to the film, but if you can find other things that are sort of up your basket, or you have connections to something, I mean, you can start to become a little bit more diverse with it. I mean, the Disney World thing obviously had nothing to do with our film whatsoever, but the two that we had both sold as soon as we put them up, because people just thought it was kind of cool that they were, getting to save money on Disney World and supporting something that they wanted to be a part of. So.
I mean, for us, we did a walking tour of Williamsburg, because my film was based in Williamsburg. So, I mean, that was for higher contributors, or even one of our rewards was a private screening and dinner with the filmmakers. People like that intimate kind of reward because they feel like they're partnering with you, or they feel like they're becoming a producer. We did offer that as a credit as well. And then, I mean, one of the smaller rewards, like for $10, I think we said, we'll put your name on our website as a thank you. And people just like seeing their name on our website and being, associated with helping us on the project. So we did T-shirts, we did the DVDs. I mean, people want something tangible. They want to be able to feel something too. So.
What type of projects are crowdfunding?
Oh, what kind of projects? Well, film projects, music projects, if you want to produce a new album. Technology is big, and that's where you have your best chance of succeeding. Not that I'm telling you to go out and create a new technology, but that excites people. There's that whole Big Bang Theory, Comic-Con, geek crowd that loves that new stuff and wants to own it as soon as it comes out. So the idea of getting in on something and being able to own it before it comes out to the market excites people, and so those are very successful. And then to a much lesser extent, for us at least, are social causes.
I mean, my takeaway is be creative, be ready to do a lot of hard work and to roll up your sleeves, but also be passionate about your project, because if you're not passionate about it, at the end of the day, nobody's going to fund you.
Yeah, I mean, it's sort of the same relevant point. It's just, I mean, everything seems very complicated, and it is, but don't let that discourage you. The only way you're going to find out how good you are at it, or whether or not you have something that's marketable or something that can be funded, is by trying it. So don't let any of the things we said today discourage you from what you want to do. The best way to figure out if you're going to succeed is to try, and if you fail the first time, at least you've learned what not to do. So I would say just go out there and do exactly what you planned on doing before you showed up here, and we sort of filled your brain with all of these things. Still go out there and use some of the things we said, but don't let anything discourage you from doing what you want to do.
I would say know that what you're doing, I'm speaking specifically for film, and I come from narrative short film, know going into it that it's going to be hard work, but idealistically, just go as far as you can. Definitely be creative. Definitely, do something that you're very passionate about. But with the social networking and your resources online and your personal resources and people in New York City specifically, there are endless ways that you can get support for your film, get support for your idea. You are your limitation. So don't, there are discouraging moments, but you're the one who's going to make your project happen at the end of the day. So kind of dream up any and every way you can get it done, and don't let your low moments overcome your high moments.
Well, thank you everyone for coming. We want to thank our panelists, Sarah, and